And it's your Indie Spotlight for the week of November 26th, 27th, I guess is Wednesday, 27th, 2024. Happy Thanksgiving to all those who celebrate. And don't forget the giveaway. We're giving away a free 30 days, a whole month of global comics. All you got to do is comment on this video on YouTube. From the people who have commented, I will randomly choose a person and do a giveaway. So if you're looking for the DC books, just a reminder, everybody, those are over on Rocky's channel, Comic Space Boom, Comic Space Boom, exclamation point on YouTube. If you prefer to listen to audio only, just head to wherever you get your podcast, whatever app or platform you prefer, do a search for the Comic Source and subscribe. You'll have access to this episode, the DC Spotlight, thousands of past episodes of all the content on the Comic Source, and that pretty much brings you up to speed. So Thanksgiving week here in the U.S., but that did not stop people from putting out some really fantastic books. Overall, I thought it was a pretty strong week for independence, Rocky. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, frankly, it's always a strong week for independence. The likelihood that there's a week that there isn't something really good is extremely rare because the odds are stacked in favor of something being great because there's just that much many more comic books than when you and I just are reviewing, for example, DC comic books every week. There's always something to enjoy with the indie weeks. And you and I have the luxury of being able to sort of pick and choose what we review, which is we don't always obviously have that choice with DC. So with indie, we have a lot more variety, and that's really nice to see. And it's good for the people listening as well. They can get some idea that comic books are more than just superhero stuff, and that's the great thing about indies is that really reinforces that.
Yeah, I agree 100%. No matter what, it could be a down week for DC. You're always going to find at least one good indie book, and it's crowded shelves out there. So that's why we like to talk about some of these books, to give you an idea of what you might want to be on the lookout for. We don't get preview copies from everybody, but we get them from a lot of different publishers. So those are the books that we're talking about. They'll be available this week at your local comic shop. And I'll go over some other books that you might want to be on the lookout for as well once we get to the end of the episode. So before we dive in, this week's giveaway is going to go to Mark McKeever, longtime not only a supporter of my show and Rocky's show, but our friend Trevor when he used to do Dark Knight Nation. Mark was a steadfast proponent of that show as well. So Mark, reach out, hit me up. Be happy to give you your code. Don't forget, you want to get a code, you want to check out Global Comics, just leave a comment on this episode down below on YouTube. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and talk about the first book that is on my list. Talked about the previous issue when it came out. It's Grommets. We're up to issue number 6 of 7, the penultimate issue. It's written by comic legend Rick Remender along with Brian Posehn. Brian Posehn being Bert from Big Bang Theory, comic actor, longtime comic book collector, and along with Rick Remender. So this is sort of the formative years. This book is set in the late 70s, early 80s, with these idea of grommets who are basically kids who like to skate. They're a little bit off the beaten path. They're into alternative, punk rock. It's called alternative now, but Brett Parsons handles the art, which he does in a fantastic cartoony way, but it also captures the spirit of the time period really well. And so does the colors by Marino Dionisio. He does a fantastic job as well. And then we've got Wes Wooten on the letters. So it starts off with this little bit of a cartoon vibe here. This guy who just got jumped by a bunch of kids from the football team, basically the whole senior starting lineup of the football team, and he's thinking about how he almost got his first romantic experience here at the age of whatever 13 or 14, but then it all went sideways and the party went crazy and wild and dreaming about it, but he gets awakened. And the captain of the football team goes and gets a gun from the car, so him and his buddy jump in their van. They drive away. While the guy whose house it was having the party at gets the crap kicked out of him, ends up in the hospital, and it's a little bit of a commentary on on sort of fitting in and coming of age and that kind of thing, sort of a wilder time, if you will. So you can always look back on those days with rose-colored glasses, but there weren't, cell phone cameras to take videos and kind of prove yourself or whatever. So when the kid's in the hospital and the cops show up, they don't want to believe that, these punk kids with mohawks and, they're not the starting lineup for the football team that are going to get, preferential treatment. So it's a little sad to see, but it also has a little bit of a ring of truth to it. But what strikes me is, as much fun as it is and kind of wild over the top, and a lot of the things that happen in these issues in this story, and Posen and Remender have talked about it in the back matter of the book. A lot of these things are based on real situations they found themselves in, or friends of theirs found themselves in. It's how poignant it is, like how relatable it is, even though this is set back then. It's sort of a time-honored rite of passage and something that all kids go through, trying to fit in, that sort of thing. And the whole idea of, found family, like the friends you make along the way. And, some people are really close with people they went to high school, others people they went to college with, that sort of thing. But, you don't get to choose who your family is, but you choose your friends. And again, that idea of found family. So, a bit of a setup issue to see how it's all going to go down after the guy gets back home. His grandfather's there sweeping up. Unfortunately, his grandfather is starting to lose it, suffering from dementia or whatever. And yeah. It actually plays in his favor. It's sad, but it's also humorous because he thinks he's going to be in big trouble for having this party. And obviously the fights broke out and TV's broken and a mess everywhere. And he asks his grandson, he's like, "Where's Evelyn?" He's like, Grandma's dead. And he sets the broom off to the side. He goes, "Wow, she really let this place go to shit." So he thinks it's all a mess because his wife wasn't cleaning it up. And so, yeah, again, kind of sad, kind of tragic, but at least he gets away with it. So, yeah, only one issue to go. I'm curious to see how it's all going to wrap up. This series rather, sold really, really well. Because again, I think it's relatable to a lot of people. I think the first issues had like 3 or 4 printings. Second issues had a couple. So, yeah, I definitely recommend checking it out. Maybe you want to wait for the trade. There's only one issue to go. But, again, this is a little bit before my time. I'm a little bit younger. I'm probably the generation that came after the main characters of this book. Probably, older cousins that were more kind of in this era. But so that's why I didn't pick it up right away. But I heard so many people talking about it that I went back and I picked up the first issue. I think I got a second print and read the first. I think about issue 1 and 2 at the same time and read them both and was just like, man, this is so good. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's a follow-up to this. It's sold so well. So
I want to add that my first exposure to this was last issue when you reviewed it, and I read that issue and I enjoyed it. And I read this issue and I feel because I was curious as to what would happen next. And even though I'm literally right in the middle of this story, this issue was awesome. I mean, he got the crap kicked out of him again. The story, it was funny. It was humorous. It was emotional. It had impact. It's a pretty rough 1980s. This is actually right in my wheelhouse. Like I remember this time period, but I did not have near as rough a teenage life as this lead character does. But this is a really great series. I think this might be one that I might wait and pick up the trade because even though I'm just reading the middle of this series, it's a high compliment to this series that I think anybody who just would pick up this issue or at a minimum last issue and this issue would still be intrigued by this series. It's surprisingly good.
Yeah, it's really fantastic. So definitely recommend you guys checking it out. All right, up next from our friends over at Ghost Machine, we have Hyde Street #2. Oh man, the first issue of this was really excellent, and the second issue is no exception. I really enjoyed this, so go ahead and give us your thoughts on it, Rocky.
Well, first, I want to give a compliment to the covers. I know, frankly, I'm known to be somebody who complains about the variant cover phase. I'm not a big big believer in a whole bunch of variant covers. But Ghost Machine, to their credit, Jeff Jones did say that they were going to limit the number of variant covers, and they've done that to great effect. And the variant covers that they do show are awesome. There's one that's reminiscent of a classic painting. I can't remember the name of the painting.
Norman Rockwell. Yeah.
Norman Rockwell, but it's awesome. It's really good. The variant covers are really awesome. As for the story itself, we get a story with the Boy Scout. The Boy Scout of Hyde Street. In the opening issue of Hyde Street, we know that Hyde Street is sort of a mysterious, eerie place where it's horror filled, but you wouldn't know it. It looks like a 1950s street, but there's a mysterious figure called the Scorekeeper, and if you end up on Hyde Street and a member of Hyde Street, you gotta collect points. And the way to collect points is that it usually involves something right out of the Twilight Zone. And one of the characters, one of these sort of like immortally trapped characters, is this young Boy Scout who is anything but a Boy Scout. We get a little bit of his history here, and going right back to 1955, where he was, he joined the Boy Scouts in order to obviously learn to, do what young boys do in the Boy Scouts. Only he wasn't a particularly nice young boy. He was better at being in starting fires than he was at learning how to do different knots. And as it turns, as we learn something about, we just get little hints of the background of this character. We know that he shows up and he basically punishes people who end up hurting people, hurting children, and he ends up in present day he ends up meeting this officer, and this police officer ends up having a dark secret of his own. And the way that it's set up, and what I really love the way that this entire issue is set up, the way that Jeff Johns and Ivan Reis, they're both the storytellers here, the way they set up the story, it's in a way that I don't know exactly what's going to happen. And I know that likely the characters are not what they seem. There's going to be some darker secrets. And that the minute I saw the cop, I said to myself, okay, this officer, what dark secret does he have? And I'm trying to imagine it as the story progresses. And lo and behold, a dark secret is revealed where he ends up he ends up being not only was he a police officer, but he was a stalker, and he stalked a woman, and he caused an accident, and he ended up taking her life. And of course, he gets his comeuppance at the end. But it's the progression getting there, and it's the story getting there as this officer sort of befriends this young Boy Scout, not knowing who this Boy Scout is, this 11-year-old who is supposedly skipping school that he meets in this diner that he'd never noticed before on the street. And it really does. Jeff Johns and Ivan Reis have done a really great job giving that sort of Twilight Zone kind of feel. And Ivan Reis, his art just really is fantastic here. And this, I'm really intrigued. I want to know more about the Scorekeeper, and I also want to know more about the background of this Boy Scout. And we're getting just enough. We're getting more and more information about this kid. I guess it is. Yeah, you're on the page. His name is Pranky?
Yeah, Philip Pip Peabody. His nickname is Pranky. Yeah. yeah. But no, I thought it was really good, and it's another chapter focusing on one of the characters of Hyde Street, and I thought it was really well done. And anybody who's a fan of Twilight Zone, but this is not only this has one advantage over Twilight Zone Hyde Street, is that you could think of each issue being an individual episode where you're getting a Twilight Zone story, but it's also focusing on one of the characters that occupies Hyde Street. But there's also a larger narrative. There's a larger story involved as well, which is awesome because you get the benefit of both worlds. For if you want to get the whole series, you can, and you'll benefit from
what looks to be building to be a larger narrative, but individually these issues tell a story in and of themselves that sort of has that sort of ominous Twilight Zone sort of lesson and theme behind it. So it works really well. So what about your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I loved it. I forgot to read the credits, like you said. Jeff Johns and Ivan Reis listed as storytellers. Obviously, John's handling more of the writing, scripting duties, and Ivan handling the art. But they're, plotting it together. Danny Mickey on inks, colors by Brad Anderson, letters by Rob Lee. We have, many times mentioned the classic television series Twilight Zone when it comes to Hyde Street, and I talked about the first issue, how it was the closest I've ever come to reading an issue of a comic that felt like a Twilight Zone episode. And when I told that to Jeff Johns, he was very happy to hear that, because that's certainly the vibe that they're going for. And I want to be clear that, as outright evil as Pranky is, we do get a little bit of an explanation. His father literally had his arm sawed off with a pocket knife when he was a POW during World War II. And so he comes home and he's angry, he's suffering from PTSD. He's obviously, the reason Pranky can't tie knots is because his dad can't show him, because he only has one hand. How are you going to tie a knot with one hand? So he doesn't fit in. He's abused, emotionally and physically by his father. The other kids make fun of him. So, you can kind of understand why he heads down the path that he heads down, but that only goes so far. That rationale only goes so far, because this guy's killing people. He sets his camp on fire. He puts hot dogs in the Scoutmaster's pack so a bear attacks him. He drills holes in the bottom of the canoe so the kids that didn't burn to death and the fire sank and drowned. So, yeah, this is not a good guy. This is not a good kid. And when he ends up on Hyde Street, and that's one of the things that we don't know how that happens yet. We don't know how anyone ends up on Hyde Street yet, but there are, some hints. But what's interesting is, he takes out this cop. He takes out the guy who's a serial killer. And then to Rocky's point earlier about finding out more about the scorekeeper, he goes to the scorekeeper. And we saw that scoreboard last issue, and we're told this issue that you have to basically harvest 10,000 souls, and then you're able to leave Hyde Street to go where you want to go. But the interesting about Pranky is he doesn't want to go anywhere. He talks about, the fine print. He's like, You keep forgetting to read the fine print. It says, deliver 10,000 souls and I can choose to leave. He's like, so I don't have to. You can't make me go anywhere. And the scorekeeper's like, you don't understand. You're meddling things that are, beyond your understanding. And Frankie doesn't care. Frankly, he doesn't care. Frankie's going to do what Pranky wants to do. So, this character, the scorekeeper, very interesting, but also interesting. It's not like he's the big boss. There's somebody else that he answers to as well. So, a really great anthology series that's being built here, with these entities, as they're called, according to Jeff, on Hyde Street, whether it be Mr. X-Ray or Pranky or Mrs. Goodbody that we saw in the Devour. It happened on Hyde Street Devour. And there's a lot of others that we're going to meet that basically are sort of giving people karmic justice in a way, giving them a chance to repent, and if they choose not to, then their soul is harvested. So just a fantastic series. And like I was telling Jeff, with that framework, with the entities that they have that will allow them to tell different type of horror stories based on what the entity's proclivity is, and then you add in the fact that anybody from any walk of life can find themselves on Hyde Street, because basically if you've sinned, if you've done something wrong in your life ever, you could find yourself on Hyde Street having to answer for that. Then the sky's the limit, because there's no person on this planet who hasn't, sinned, so to speak, or made a mistake or done something wrong. That's just the way that it is. What is it? What is the saying? To sin is human and to forgive is divine, or something like that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So everybody's done it. So that allows for infinite number of stories. So, all right. Up next, we have another title from Ghost Machine. This one is called Hornsby and Halo. I'll go ahead and give the creative team here before I forget this time again, like I did last time. It's written by Peter J. Tomasi, We have, well, actually, I should say Peter J. Tomasi and Peter Snyberg, I think is how you say his name. It's Snejbjerg. Obviously, he's Nordic. But they're listed as storytellers. Obviously, Peter more handling the scripting. Well, Peter J. Tomasi, I should say, and then the other Peter handling the art duties. John Kalis handles the coloring, Rob Lee on letters. And the premise of this story is there is a war between heaven and hell. You know, that's not the newest idea or what have you. But they're trying to broker a peace, if you will. So they take a demon. We're not told exactly, the word Satan or devil is not here, but we're told that they're highborn. This little female devil, if you will. Her name is Rose. She's highborn. She's the heir apparent, the future queen of the Inferno, we're told. And then we're also introduced to Zachary, who's also a highborn, a future archangel. So again, they're not saying he's Jesus. They're not saying he's the son of God or whatever. But he is somebody who's, highborn, and he's way up in the hierarchy of heaven. And so in classic fashion, these two, when they're very small, too small to even remember, they're taken and they're given to the other side in this swap, right? Like think of Scott Free and Orion in DC lore. But they're not like swapped to then one lives in hell and one lives in heaven. No, they're sent down to earth. And the boy who is from heaven is sent down to live with a family whose, I'll say, proclivities would lead them to end up in hell, as opposed to Rose, who's the little devil child. She's sent to live with a family whose lifestyle and life choices and what have you mean that in the afterlife they would go to heaven. So they're not exactly put in each other's realm, but they're put in a place that's going to go against their nature. And it's this whole idea of how do you end up being who you are because of nature, because of what inherently you're born with, or because of nurture, the way that you're brought up, and also this idea of trying to broker a peace between heaven and hell. So it's a really interesting premise, and I think the art by Peter Snyberg is absolutely fantastic. And yeah, give us your thoughts on it, Rocky.
Well, it's kind of funny. I almost feel like to a certain extent the writers played his hand. Tomasi's played his hand already, because I find that I like both these characters right off the bat. They both seem like nice kids to me. both Rose and Zachary, Rose who's originally from hell and Zachary who's from heaven, they both seem like good kids. And the whole nature versus nurture. I mean, I guess they're supposed to show that as if they can get along, and if they could overcome their nature, being from hell and heaven, and if they can get along and become friends on earth, which is where arguably perhaps that's what's happening here, then it seems to me that, well, if the embodiment of the devil himself, or if an agent of hell and an agent of heaven, to put it a particular way, can get along, why can't heaven and hell get along? And so, and we already know that you can infer from the narrative that, at least as from the beginning, that there's going to be forces that will want to sabotage any suggestion that there could be harmony between a person from hell and a person from heaven. And the fact that this is very reminiscent of New Gods, of New Gods and Apocalypse, but it's actually it's done with it. I like the fact that it reads more like a I don't want to say a children's tale, but it's a story. It's dealing with younger main characters that are just in their formative years, and they're learning the ropes of good and evil and what's right and wrong, and just through an average, ordinary life. And that's what I like about it, and that's the central appeal of it, because you don't really need. It's clear that there's going to be other characters that are coming into play here, because you can see even at the very beginning of this issue, which Tomasi does so well, is you can see the parents in hell and heaven, and you can see that there's larger forces and celestial forces at play. And I like how they're both kind of cute. I mean, they're both. This is very well done. This feels like I find myself endured. I find this to be very endearing in a way that even actually surpasses my Super Sons when I enjoyed Super Sons. So I'm getting those types of vibes. But I actually like you mentioned before. You hinted that maybe it's a little tropey. We've seen this sort of done before. We have, but I really like this, and I have to say I particularly like the art. The artworks really well, and I guess that's Peter Schnellberg.
Yeah.
Schneiberg, yeah, it's very well done. So I'm intrigued to see where this is going to go. What's the relationship like going to be between these two? It seems like this first issue, if there's going to be antagonism between between these two characters, well, you'd almost expect that. Teenagers not getting along doesn't mean that that they're devil and saints. And so there's so many different directions that this story can go. I'm definitely in it after this first issue. I was captivated on the sneak preview that we got a while back. I can't remember where that was, but I enjoyed this. I thought this was well done. And I think this has an audience that maybe might break the mainstream comic book audience. This is definitely a comic that I would, not only do I enjoy it as an adult, but I would absolutely give this to, I think, a younger, younger adult as well, or even a preteen.
Yeah, I was in the Ghost Machine special primer where they were playing baseball against each other. Really interesting. They don't know the extent of their abilities. They don't know that they're any different from any other kids, which is shown at the end when they both kind of manifest sort of the powers based on who they are. With Zachary sprouting wings and having like lightning powers, and then Rose showing up as this little like horned demon with a pitchfork and what have you, and they don't they each don't remember it the next morning. They kind of have dreams like, what's going on? Then he's like I had wings, and she's like I had a tail, and so yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens and how it's all going to play out. So yeah, interesting setup, and I agree with you. It would be really good for younger readers as well, if you have somebody who you think might be interested in checking it out. Again, I mean, the natural the natural thing to do with Tomasi in an all ages book is to to think about, like you said, Super Sons. But yeah, I wouldn't say it's I wouldn't say that's a completely unreasonable comparison, but I would say that it feels like it's going to be a lot more layered. Excuse me, if you know what I mean, because there's so much to explore, like them discovering their powers, that sort of thing. We'll have to see how that all plays out as well. Okay, up next, we talked about this book, the previous issue. It's Knights versus Samurai, written by David Dastmalchian, who many may know as an actor. The art is by Fede Mele, colors by Ulysses Areola, letters by Animal Design. Bit of a historical adventure, I guess you'd say. So what did you think about issue 3?
Well, first of all, I continue. There's something about this art. I just absolutely Fede Mele just really, really good art. It's very graphic, but it's very fine lined and detailed. It's really, I love it. I absolutely love it. It's perfect for it just visually tells the tale so well. I also got to give a shout out to the cover. The cover's fantastic with these 3 ships, dark ship on this dark waters and the skyline, this massive dragon in the background, which is absolutely reflective of, God forbid, the content in the comic book. And this issue, and perhaps not surprisingly, the series is called Knights versus Samurai. At some point, the Knights do fight the Samurai, and then, of course, at some point, they're likely going to team up and likely be battling a dragon. And this is what the story is moving toward. There's a lot of there's a lot of character work here, and that's what I like. We're getting to know we're getting to know the knights. We're getting to know the samurai. And you know what it reminds me of, and I think I said this before, it reminds me of I don't know if you watched was it on HBO, the Shogun series?
I did not watch it. FX, wasn't it?
It's really good. And in particular, where the lettering here, I want to give a shout out to the letterer and world design. When the samurai talk, you see it in their native tongue, and then below it you see it in English. And when I remember watching Shogun, in the scenes because they would speak in their native tongue, and you would see on the screen what they were saying in English, but not all the time. Sometimes you would, sometimes you wouldn't, because and so I sort of like that aspect of it. But by showing the language and the letters of the language that they're speaking, it really reinforces to me as the reader the fact that I feel like a stranger in a strange land. And yet I know what they're saying, but I also know that this is different. I feel out of place myself, because I can actually, for myself as a reader, I don't know about others, but I feel I can relate more to the knights because I speak their language. And I feel more like a foreigner, a fish out of water when I see these samurai myself. And it does a really good job, combination with the fantastic art, the great coloring and the lettering, to really reinforce that feeling of these are two different forces that really don't know each other, and they're trying to get to know each other. And the lettering is reinforcing that language barrier just perfectly. And it works so well. And of course, then you got the build up of the tension of the different machinations and the agendas of both sides, because they're both drawn to this area of the world, because the knights are drawn to this area of the world because they lost some of their knights there. They lost some ships. They lost some of their people there in the first issue, and that bled into over the next two issues into this third issue. And of course, you've got the timeline leading up to this, to the appearance of the dragon at in the final page reveal here. Very well done. This is definitely another one of those indie surprises that where, quite frankly, another issue where if you picked up issue 3, how many times can you say you can pick up a third issue and want to buy this and want to buy the previous 2 issues? Not always. This is one where I think it's going to have, I hope this gets more attention, that it has some longevity, because this should, more eyes should be on this comic. Maybe it's just, it hits the right spots for me, but I absolutely love the art. And the story by David Dalsmalchian is, I'm gonna remember these names. I'm going to remember these names. It's impressive stuff. What about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, not entirely surprising that it's going to be the knights and the samurai have to team up against a larger foe, these dragons. We've seen the knights, at the very beginning, slaying dragons, and sea serpents and what have you. So it's interesting. I mean, really, the common enemy is the corrupt guy who sort of set up the situation so that the king would send people out there. Really, he wants to harvest the riches that the samurai have. So, yeah, unfortunately, these noble warriors are fighting against each other when really they have much more in common than they don't. They're much more alike than they are different. So maybe they'll learn that while fighting this dragon. We'll have to wait and see. All right. Up next, a book from Mad Cave called Synap. I did not get a chance to read this, but I know you got a chance to check it out, Rocky. So, give us your thoughts on this one. Well, actually,
yes.
Before you do that, I should mention, written by Chris Moses, Andrea Giannini on art, James Affrede on colors, and Reed Hinckley Barnes handles the letters.
Yeah, this series is a cross between, here it comes, a cross between Pacific One, the movie Pacific One, and Well, Pacific, actually, it feels like Pacific One. It feels like a cross between Pacific One and our modern day fascination with UFOs. If you've been following the congressional hearings at the United States right now about UFOs, or UAPs, you heard about the Tic Tac incident where those they looked like Tic Tacs that were floating over the ocean at super speed, and they could make a 90-degree turn at Mach 17, and they could do things that the U.S. intelligence and the Army can't explain. Well, the Tic Tacs actually show up in this issue, in this comic, and they appear to be, now, why do they show up in this issue? Well, they appear to be something that the U.S. military is concerned about. Meanwhile, there's this Synap Industries, this Synap Technologies is a company working with the U.S. government, and they're trying to put together what looks to be glorified giant transformers that merge with humans. So the consciousness, they're trying to link up the consciousness of human beings with essentially a giant construct. And what they've done is that they've found various artifacts, ancient artifacts, and in this issue, they find what essentially amounts to like the eye of this artifact that they're ultimately hooking up, and they're building this giant machine, which looks like a sort of a giant transformer, and they've got like something they call drivers, 8 or 9 different drivers, human beings that have particular talents that can somehow, I think, merge with these machines. And at the same time, there's it's not entirely clear. They clearly want to build a weapon. They want to merge with this machine, and in so doing, what does that? I believe, what does that have to do with these little Tic Tac flying UAPs that are sort of showing up and then disappearing? How are they related? Maybe the aliens that are in these Tic Tac ships, maybe they don't want humans to find this technology. Maybe it's related. I got a lot of questions. I don't exactly know what's going on. I don't know who all these drivers are, these humans that have these abilities that they get deprived of their senses, and they go into deep sensory deprivation, and they've got to be able to survive in certain environments, and because it allows them to concentrate. And I think that allows them to link with this machine, and that they've finally been able to put together. What does this have to do with aliens or this UAPs? I don't know. The series is called Synap. I think that I think it's timely. I think Chris Moses, I've not read any interview with him or anything on this series. I think it's interesting. He's clearly using modern day fascination with UAPs, along with his love for Pacific Rim, the movie Pacific Rim, and maybe a love of Transformers and science fiction in general. Andrea Giannini the artist, colorist James O'Frady, they do a pretty good job. I'm interested. I'm curious to see where this is going to go. And for lovers of people who are fascinated with UFOs and our real world UAPs, and if you like Pacific Rim and Transformers, you might want to give this a look.
Yeah, this wasn't really on my radar, but now after hearing you talk about it, I probably have to go back and read it. It sounds pretty intriguing. So, yeah, we'll see how that plays out. All right, next up, I'm going to talk about the latest issue of Void Rivals, this being the book from Robert Kirkman that basically started the Energon universe. We're up to issue number 14, and the whole idea of Void Rivals, basically you have these two different, they're told that they're different, these two different societies, these two different civilizations, and they live on the same ring, like it's a ring around a star, like familiar with like a Dyson sphere. It's sort of the same thing, but it's a ring, like Ring World, Larry Niven's Ring World series. But the secret is that actually Zertonia and Agoria, the two different civilizations or worlds or what have you, that are each one half of this ring, the people that live there are the same species. They're the same, even though they've been told they're mortal enemies, have been fighting for years. And we've been told recently that if they were to unify, it would bring about the end of both civilizations. And so this is a bit of a transitional issue here. The people in Agoria know or have picked up some sort of spacecraft that's heading their way. We know this to be people from Cobra La, like from the G.I. Joe book. What, G.I. Joe? Way out in space, cosmic, whatever. That's the craziness of the Energon universe for you. So we have Agoria sending a pilot out, basically, to go and intercept this this ship and find out. And so he goes and he gets a new android, because the guy that goes, he's got a lot going on. His father is basically the head of Zertonia, not Zertonia, but Agoria, director, or what's his name? I can't remember what his name is. I think we have it here.
Sorry.
Yeah, Unity brings Golant. Golant brings about the end. So anyway, I can't remember what his name is, but his son's name is Derek, and he's Minister Doolin. That's his name. But his son Derek has been a main character in the series throughout. He's the one that crashed while he was fighting against the Zertonian, and then eventually, through them trying to survive, they unmasked and realized that they were the same species, and they've been trying to spread the truth because they thought their leaders didn't know, and then come to find out Derek's father, Director Doolin, knew all along. The leadership of Zertonian knows as well. But it's this prophecy, this myth that with Unity comes Goliant, and with Goliant comes the end. Whatever that means. So Derek volunteers. He's their best pilot. He volunteers to go out to intercept this ship. And it turns out that ship is actually from Cybertron, and it's who is it? Ram? Not Ramjet. I remember. He says what his name. Hot Rod, that's who it is. Okay. So right. One of the Transformers, Hot Rod. Meanwhile, the woman from Zertonia that crashed with Darek, she's on her way to find sort of the god of Zertonia, the goddess, I guess you would say, of Zertonia. Solia is her name. And she's got Derek's old handroid, which is like this sort of AI construct that you wear as a mechanical glove on your hand that can do all sorts of cool stuff. And so they have a connection, but it's tenuous. They get along, but not completely, because again, they've been raised to be mortal enemies. So there's a lot of political machinations, and there's a lot of conflicting feelings, and even the main two characters, Solia and Derek, are not exactly sure how to navigate everything. And then this prophecy comes in where if they unite, it could cause the end of both civilizations. But the problem is, even if they don't unite, it feels like these civilizations are winding down anyway. Like, nobody in Zertonia has enough to eat. Nobody in Agoria has enough water. Like, they're really kind of struggling. So you would think that they would come together and try to find a way forward together. But things are a lot more complicated than that. And then you throw in the Transformers and the Decepticons, and the Autobots and Cobra La, and the Energon that is in this area of space that many people covet for its abilities to power weaponry and all sorts of stuff. So it's this big, sprawling, epic story. And once in a while we get issues like this where, to be honest, there's not a lot of plot moving forward. There's not a lot of the story that moves forward. It's more about every once in a while Kirkman does one of these issues where, okay, I just got to put all the people in place for the next big thing to happen, which is what we had a few issues ago when Derek and Solia, managed to cobble together a spaceship and return to the ring. That is the place where Agoria and Zertonia are, and then tried to get back to their respective spots, and then it was a big battle and all kinds of stuff. So yeah, it's sort of typical of Kirkman books in the way that they're paced, where you get a ton of action for 2 or 3 issues, and then everything kind of slows down. And not to say there's no action at all, but things have a tendency to kind of slow down, and then he's putting everybody in place to see what happens next. So, again, this is a pretty popular series based on the fact that it was the series that, like I said, kicked off the Energon universe secretly. Like, we knew it was the Energon universe, but what a lot of people didn't realize was that Energon universe was going to contain the Transformers, and it was going to contain the G.I. Joe book as well. It wasn't until I think it was Skyfire that showed up in like Void Rivals 3 or what have you that everybody was like, wait, what? Should be paying attention to this book because what? So that, yeah, it was a bit of a surprise. Well done on Kirkman for pulling that off. Anything to add, Rocky?
No, actually, I can't because I was unable to read this issue. I never had enough time.
All right, well, let's move on. Up next, book we're going to talk about, and it's been absolutely outstanding since the first issue. It's Tin Can Society, and this is a book that is in Remender's, what is it, Giant Generator, I think is the name of his imprint over at Image. But this is written by Peter Warren. Well, it's listed as story, Peter Warren and Rick Remender, so they're handling the plot together. But then it's scripted by Peter Warren. The art is by Francesco Mobili, colors by Chris Shukri, and letters by Jackie Marzan. So, yeah, give us your thoughts on this.
Well, this is basically the story of a group of people who they were friends when they were younger, particularly when they were teenagers, and they sort of grew up together. And as they became adults, one of them became a superhero, and he was actually one who was sort of a he was a paraplegic or whatever, and his name was Johnny, and he grew up to be a superhero by the name of Caliburn. And it was established in the first issue that this is a murder mystery. It was established right up front in the first issue that Caliburn was murdered, and it's as this series is playing out, writers Peter Warren and Rick Remender have done a good job of sort of setting up and exploring the question as who murdered Caliburn, who murdered Johnny. Well, could it be one of his friends? We have we've got characters Cassia, we've got Adam, Val, a couple others. This particular issue explores in a very surprisingly graphic way some secrets about Johnny growing up, and in particular Johnny and Cassia had a relationship, and they were much closer than their other friends understood or ever knew. They had a blossom. They were very close when they were younger, and as they got older, Cassia and Johnny, who would become Caliburn and the most successful of all of them, and rich, sort of like an Elon Musk. If Elon Musk became a superhero, and maybe without the narcissism, he would be Johnny. And in any event, Johnny and Cassia had it became a sexual relationship. And this is really sort of played out. And this is something that Cassia never really revealed to her friends. And because Cassia is investigating Johnny's murder, because she's a photographer, and she's I guess a reporter / photographer, and she wants to get to the bottom of it. And she's been very accusatory of in the previous issues where other friends, you could understand why some of these other friends have motives as well, which was set forth in the first two issues. But of course, we don't believe those are the murderers or murderer. But Cassia herself could be a prime suspect, and she's keeping secrets from them as they're all trying to figure out who murdered their friend or what happened to him. How did he come to the end? And there's a particular interesting revelation at the end here, something that Cassia never disclosed to her friends, and that is the fact that at one time, Johnny, when he was Caliburn, when he was a superhero, he ended up, I'm guessing, killing somebody or using lethal force himself. And that's interesting because if he did that, that could open up all kinds of other suspects as to who would have had a motive to kill Johnny. And so that's really it. But it's where this works so well is the art's fantastic, but you also get into the emotions of the characters, and in particular, you feel the emotion, how deeply upsetting this is to Cassia herself, because she's remembering all these moments she loved Johnny, and this her connection to him, it's still there, and she's hurting, while at the same time she's not opening up to her friends, as they're all, because they've had, some of them had a falling out. So think of, I use the example of Stand By Me. It's a very imperfect analogy, but uh, there's a deep connection to these friends here, but there's also a dysfunctional one. If you Any group of friends, if you take 5 or 6 friends that are close and grow up together, you're gonna have aspects of function and dysfunction. And one great thing about friends that hang out with each other, everything always functions in dysfunction. It's the nature of friendships and growing up and what have you, and that doesn't change just because you get older all the time. And that's what writer Rick Remender does so well in collaboration with Peter Warren. And the art by Francesco Mobili is really fantastic. Colors by Chris Chuckery. You can see sort of like the passion and the romance and the love between Cassia and Johnny throughout this issue. And yeah, I think it works very well. I'm really looking forward. This might be one where I very rarely buy hardcovers, but if this, I'm really, this is usually near the top of the read pile when I get it. And I love the name. I just love the name of the Tin Can Society, why it's called the Tin Can Society. I could go on, but I really enjoyed this. Did you happen to have a chance to read it yourself?
Oh yeah, I read it. It was fantastic. It's one of those books, along with the book I'm going to talk about next, where I hear people complain, well, it's kind of slow. There's not enough action. Like, if you're picking this up, expecting it to be a superhero book, Caliburn is sort of an Iron Man analog in a lot of ways. Yeah, Johnny was, he had issues with his legs. He had a disability. And it was, his intelligence and his ability to invent, where he created this sort of exoskeleton that allowed him to walk and run and do other things, more like a normal person. And then, he expanded that to this exoskeleton where he was literally a superhero. And so in that way, it's kind of like an analog for Iron Man. But if you're expecting this to be Iron Man with him, going out and fighting bad guys or whatever, then you're looking for the wrong thing. You really are. That's not the point of this story. The point of the story is, like you were saying earlier, Rocky. It's the relationships. It's these friends who grew up together who yes, there was some dysfunction, and yeah, there was good-natured ribbing and jealousy, the way kids can be jealous or what have you, but there was still the innocence of the relationship and the innocence of friends that became friends when they're in junior high, and then how those relationships have evolved over the years and become more complicated. Case in point in this issue with Johnny and Cassie, having a physically intimate relationship and keeping it from the others and what have you. And so, it's all about the idea of growing up and how you grow up and your relationships change and they mature and they do become more complicated, and your relationship with one person from your, peer group may change and how that affects others, and you keep things and from each other or whatever. So in that way, it's a political book. And I don't mean politics like, government, kind of politics, but politic in that it's about the relationship between people and navigating that. And, it's being complicated by the fact that Johnny was Caliburn, and he was, one of the most famous people in the world, and he's been murdered, and who's responsible for it. And yeah, I mean, the title of this issue is Fucking Up. And then, like you said, we get the revelation on the last page. We don't know, what happened or exactly how or why or what have you, but we just see Johnny in his Caliburn armor, and he's covered in blood. So yeah, did he go too far in punishing a criminal? Did he kill somebody who was completely innocent? Like we don't have any idea. We don't have any idea what happened. But obviously Cassie has a better idea than us, and along with the fact that she was having an intimate relationship with Johnny, she's likely kept that from the group as well. So how that's going to play out and how that's going to affect the group dynamic, well, that's what we're going to find out. And that's the point. That's what makes it compelling. It's not, oh, let me see what criminal mastermind Caliburn's going to go up against next, and how's he going to defeat him, whatever. Again, that's not the point of the story. It's not that type of story. So that doesn't mean it's any better or worse than those other types of stories, if that's what you prefer. But that's not the point. So when I see people complaining that this is slow, or the next book that I'm about to talk about, when I see people complaining it's just moving too slow, you're missing the point. This is, and it's okay. It's okay for you not to read it. If you don't like it, you don't have to read it. Not every comic is for every person. So, and that's why we're lucky to be, comic readers in this day and age, because there are so many books that you can go out there and read. And the next book I'm going to talk about is Cowl, 1964, issue number 3. This is a book I constantly hear people talking, the Cowl, not this particular issue, but Cowl overall, a book that I hear people, I don't want to say complain, but talk about, God, the first volume of Cowl was so slow. You're missing the point, because this one really is about politics, in the fact that Cowl is basically, it's a union. It's a superhero labor union in Chicago. It came out of World War II, when the heroes that helped win the war came back, and there was the Six, they were called, which were basically 6 supervillains that teamed up, and they were terrorizing Chicago. And so Cowl was formed so that, and it's an interesting idea. This is written by Kyle Higgins along with his good friend Alex Siegel. Rod Reese handles the art, Buddy Boudon on letters. But this idea that, there was a way to do it that was better than just having people out there, because so you have a labor union, there's rules, you sort of police your own, you get retirement, you get health care, you can sort of have things organized, you're patrolling this area, you're patrolling this area, you're patrolling this area, that sort of thing. And so that was the first 11 issues of Cowl, I think, kind of went through that, and sort of as the last of the 6 were defeated, was Cowl still needed, and there was different machinations that went on, people doing questionable things, maybe making deals with mobsters to still look like a threat. So the idea that Cowl was still needed, they're sort of trying to prolong their inevitability and keep themselves around. Well, now the whole idea in Cowl 1964 is to branch out to some other cities, to branch out to San Francisco, to branch out to New York City as well. But while this is trying to be done by the head of Cowl, one of the founders, Jeffrey Warner, some of those secrets, some of those things that he's done in the past are starting to be exposed. And so now he's trying to navigate that. He's trying to say, I didn't do that. Where's your proof? That sort of thing. And so, again, it's a very political book. It is a completely political book. It's not about seeing these members of the Cowl, members of the League, go out there and fight against bank robbers or kidnappers or whatever. It's about the relationships. It's about the secrets. It's about the choices that they made in the first volume, which you don't necessarily have to read the first volume in order to understand what's going on here. Kyle Higgins and Alex Siegel do a good job of kind of recapping and telling you what you need to know. But I also love the fact that it's set in the 1960s, right? Coming out of the 50s into the 60s. The first volume of Cowl ended in 1960. Now this is 1964. So what happened in America, and famously happened in America between those years? Well, Kennedy was assassinated, right? So Jeffrey Warner, the head of Cowl, is trying to use that fear that we're not safe and that sort of thing to expand Cowl, to expand his reach. He's a little bit, I don't want to say power hungry, but he's definitely in love with the sound of his own voice, and he likes being the guy that's calling the shots. So it's a natural progression for him to say, hey, I want to branch out. And the other thing is, he does have skeletons in his closet, and he's aware of that, and he knows that they can be exposed. But if he can make Cowl big enough, if he can make it sort of bigger than himself, that even if his secrets are exposed, if so many cities are dependent on Cowl for law enforcement, they won't be able to just say, okay, let's shut Cowl down. He definitely wants it to live on, and he wants to have a legacy and what have you. So, again, a political book, expertly done. The Rod Reese art, very good as well, especially capturing the time period. So I would recommend this to people that like things like Mad Men. You know, that was very much a period piece set in the late 50s, early 60s in advertising agency. And that book, or show rather, that show was, yeah, it was about an ad agency and the people that worked there, but it wasn't a show about advertising, right? Even though that was the main setting. Just like the
Yeah,
main setting
that's right.
here, the backdrop is these are superheroes and there's, supervillains and what have you. But this is not a superhero book. Just like Mad Men was a political show in terms of it was about the relationships and the choices that the people made and how it affected their lives. That's this. This is Mad Men, but for superheroes. A superhero labor union set in Chicago with people making choices, both good and bad, and how does it affect their lives and how does it affect their legacy, and why are they making the choices they're making in this time period of the 60s with, the civil rights movement right around the corner coming out of World War II, which is when Cal was founded, into the sort of rose-colored glasses way that we look back, at the 50s, into the 60s, realizing that there were labor problems and civil rights problems and prejudice and people being discriminated against and all that sort of thing. A great time of political upheaval and about to ramp up even more with the civil rights movement, as I said, and right in there is the perfect time to set this Cal universe. So I love the first volume of Cal. People that say it's too slow, again, I'm like, man, you are missing the forest for the trees. That is not what this is. And yeah, this is a book where when I read it, I'm always sad when I get to the end of the issue because I want to know. I want to know what's going to happen next. Not, hey, are they going to defeat the bad guy? Or are they going to catch the bank robber or whatever? I want to know what secrets are going to be exposed and how is Jeffrey Warner going to navigate that, and how is he going to be punished, and what's going to be the karmic justice of it, and what are the when those secrets are exposed, what are the people that call themselves his friends and his colleagues, what do they do? How do they react? It's very sort of real world in that way. And yeah, I can't really recommend it highly enough. Again, the Rod Reese art is absolutely fantastic. So I think I want to say this is 4 issues. So it's kind of interesting because it seems like, man, it doesn't seem like it could be wrapped up in only one more issue. But I don't know. Maybe it's more than 4 issues. Now, only 4 issues have been solicited. So yeah, I think it's supposed to wrap up next issue, but we'll see if that's actually the case.
I'll have to pick up the first trade and give it a read. You've definitely intrigued me with your description of the general premise. So it sounds interesting.
Yeah, it's fantastic, and so it actually started. Cal started its life as a short film. So for those that don't know, Kyle Higgins,
really?
he went to film school. That was his kind of his, I don't want to say first love, but it's what he went to school for. And so as his senior project or whatever you want to call it, that's him and Alex Siegel created a short film called Cal, and that's these are those characters or what have you. And the other thing that's interesting, it is also in the Massiverse, in the Radiant Black universe, right? So if you've read Radiant Black, they mention Cal a few times, and you've had action figures of Cal, people that were in Cal and what have you. Yeah, those are the real life, or those are the action figures of the supposed real life heroes that exist in the Massiverse. So, all right, up next we have a book from Boom. It's called Red Before Black. It's written by a friend of the show, Stephanie Phillips, illustrated by Goran Sudzuka, colored by Eve Zvorsina, and lettered by Tom Napolitano. I think we both read this, Rocky, but I'll give you a chance to go first.
Well, I Red Before Black is this is hilarious. This is an action-packed, hilarious, almost like a duo comic. It's like an odd couple. I mean, this lead character, I guess there are co-characters here. There's Valeria Morel. She's sort of like this disgruntled, like disgraced veteran who suffers from PTSD, and she's and The character work is fantastic, but she goes. I mean, the setup in the first issue was she was going to go and she meets up with this Leo character who is this sort of she's a this female character. Leo is the blonde, and Valerie is the brunette. Valerie suffers from PTSD as a veteran, and Leo is sort of like a criminal, and they are they're kind of I'm not even sure specifically what the hell they get into. They piss off the wrong people. Meanwhile, Valerie has PTSD. She's hallucinating, and her hallucinations come full circle in this particular issue. Last issue ended where you thought Valerie was killed. And then Leo throws Valerie in the back of her car and is driving through Florida. And then Valerie wakes up in the back of Leo's car in this issue. And it's so hilarious. Writer Stephanie Phillips has a hell of a how she scripted this. I don't know. It's hilarious because, I mean, so here we have this Leo. She's sitting there smoking a cigarette, driving the car with the audio on the radio blaring, but she's playing porn on the audio. And all of a sudden, Valerie wakes up, and there's a struggle and a fight that occurs in the car. And what makes it so hilarious is as they're fighting with each other, and it goes from panel to panel, the words are actually basically porn is what's blaring as they're driving. And all I could picture I pictured a Quentin. This is something I'd see in a Quentin Tarantino film. You know, two women beating the crap out of each other in a car going at high speed while porn is playing on their on the audio. It was hilarious. I thought this is good stuff. And oddly enough, I don't really know why, because I got some questions here. There's something lovable about Leo. She's kind of a quirky blonde, but I think she's smarter than she lets on because she's not a dumb blonde. And Val is certainly not stupid either. But Val suffers from, I thought she was hallucinating these red tentacles coming out of the ground. But apparently, Leo can see them too this issue. So they can both sort of see the same thing. And in any event, there's also a special agent who's looking for both of them, who's this hot looking agent. I love the writing here. Stephanie Phillips does just such a good job. All the female characters in here. This is I got to be honest. Like a lot of shows that I watch with female leads, I don't often enjoy them as much as I probably should, and I guess it's just I find them on TV. I don't find that they're well written, and I often will complain that there's not enough. There's got to be a strong male lead. I've said that, but Stephanie Phillips proves me completely wrong and makes me say, you know what? That's not always true. These are two strong female leads. It's entertaining as hell. It's funny. It's violent. It's got moving character moments. It's dealing with deep issues, PTSD. It's dealing with and I don't know what Leo has. She's obsessed with pancakes and cigarettes. They're a very odd couple. They're the opposites in so many ways. But this is a very, very very entertaining comic. Dare I say this is one where I might have to get the trade in this at the end of the day because I never got the first issue. My retailer never got it. I ended up I read the second issue first. I've never read the first issue. I read the second issue and this third issue, and I desperately want to get the first issue, but I can't seem to acquire it anywhere. But this is really good stuff. I'm going to be very blunt and say this is the best Stephanie Phillips story I've ever read. And I've read a lot of Stephanie Phillips. This is my favorite. And I never fully read the first issue. So that's, this is Stephanie Phillips. For me, this is her at her finest. I mean, it's great stuff. I really enjoyed this.
I wouldn't go so far as to say it's my favorite. It's reminiscent of some of her other work, where she's had some very, very strong female characters in this. Artemis the Assassin probably might be my favorite, but yeah. So you missed it on in the first issue. So yeah, Val goes to this guy. We don't know who he is at the time. We find out later that he's somebody that she was a soldier with. He was a member of her platoon or whatever. And she goes to him. She's just gotten out of prison. She goes to him and she asks for a job. Leo was supposed to be selling drugs for that guy, and instead stole the drugs and was trying to sell them herself. And then when she goes to try to sell them, the guy she's trying to sell them to knows that Leo stole the drugs from this other guy, and basically says, okay, here's what we're going to do, Leo. You're going to give me the drugs, or I'm going to go and tell so-and-so that you stole them and sold them to me. And so she's like, okay, I'm outmaneuvered, and she leaves. And they're in this guy's, they're in the office of this guy's bar, dance club type thing. So what Leo does, she leaves, supposedly, it appears that she leaves. She goes and gets in her truck and drives it through the wall, almost runs over the two guys that just basically stole the drugs that she had stolen from somebody else, and takes the drugs back and leaves. So Leo's a complete psychopath. She's just nuts. Meanwhile, Val is told by this crime boss that, yeah, if you want a job, you need to go kill Leo and she's like, well, what about the drugs? He's like, I don't care about the drugs. I just don't want people to think it's okay to steal from me. So, kind of a classic, crime boss thing to do. So what we find out in the second issue actually is that, in addition to these powers or whatever the hell it is that Val has, where she's manifesting this jungle kind of thing or whatever, that the whole reason Val got out of prison is she was been recruited by this FBI agent to go undercover in this guy's organization, and find out who his supplier is, and go higher up the chain. They want to not just catch the guy that used to be a fellow soldier of Val, but all the people that he works for and works with, and what have you. So she's undercover, and she's supposed to go kill Leo. But when she meets Leo, they kind of hit it off. And, Leo's quirky or whatever. So, yeah, they have a fight in the diner, and Leo stabs her, but doesn't kill her. So it's almost like they're like frenemies in a way, because Leo knows that Val's there to kill her, but they have a lot in common, and Val doesn't really want to kill her because Val doesn't want to kill anybody. I think she's trying to get away from that part of her life. So, yeah, there's a lot of moving parts here, and there's some zaniness and craziness going on. And the whole reason it's called Red Before Black, and we get this in the first couple panels of the first issue, there's it talks about the different kind of snakes that are poisonous in Florida. And you basically, you start at the head of the snake, and if the red ring on the snake comes before black, the saying is, red before black, you're okay, Jack. But if it's red before yellow, you're a dead fellow, or something like that. So it has to do with the order of that the colors come on the snake. So what that has to do with anything? Why is this called Red Before Black? What are these manifestations that Val has seen? That's all to be determined. And the FBI agents and all that. Yeah, there's a lot going on, a lot of moving parts. Like you said, this is Stephanie Phillips at her best. When she does these type of stories, it's my favorite. I like this stuff more than stuff that not that she hasn't done good stuff at Marvel and DC, but when she does this type of stuff, like I mentioned before, Artemis and the Assassin, which I think was the very first thing that I ever read from her over at Aftershock, which was kind of a spy thriller type thing. This is similar to that, and I enjoy it. And yeah, I don't. The fact that it's female characters, male characters, whatever, it doesn't matter to me. I don't really think about it in that term, because they're just good stories. So, but yeah, Leo's a character. Val's, much different type of character. They're an odd couple. You used that term before. And yeah, I mentioned Thelma, get a little bit of a Thelma and Louise vibe. So yeah, really, really curious to see where it goes. So, yeah, I mean, Stephanie Phillips, I'm just a fan. She's just such a fantastic writer. So All right, last book I'm going to talk about in detail. It's been a while since I've talked about a Star Trek book, and Star Trek has been getting really, really good, everybody. So if you haven't been reading IDW Star Trek stuff, it's leading into the lore war next year. Highly encourage you all to go listen to my interview from with Jackson Lansing from New York Comic Con. He does a great job of recapping everything that's happened in the Star Wars series over the last 2 years, which has all been leading to the lore war, where Lore, Data's evil android brother, is basically has this weapon, this orb of destruction that came from the Bajoran gods that he has managed to modify in such a way that he's rewriting the universe however he wants, like kind of remaking it. First, he remade it in his own image, but then everything was boring and there was no conflict, and that was, he didn't like that. So now he's remaking it in such a way that he can go out and quote unquote break things. So instead of everybody just being like in his image, he gives them the illusion of free will so they can go out and do things, and then he can come and stomp on them. So yeah, if you're familiar at all with lore, it's gonna sound like, yeah, that sounds like a very lore thing to do. Meanwhile, over in the pages of Defiant, we have the sort of the end of this attempted coup in the Romulan Empire. So the Romulans were trying to create not a weapon, but some shielding technology. So we know the Romulans have the ability to cloak their ships, and cloaking technology is forbidden by the Federation for various reasons. It's not 100% stable, and it can cause all sorts of issues and what have you. But the Romulans have used it for years because they're sneaky and backstabbing. But having lost the recent Dominion War, they decided to come up with this failsafe in case they were ever threatened. They were trying to find a way to literally cloak their entire planet and their entire kind of system of planets. And so they did some experiments, and what they ended up doing is they ended up fucking up their sun. So their sun's could explode at any time. It's going to go supernova at any time, which will wipe out the Romulan Empire. And so the leaders of the Romulan Empire didn't want to tell everybody, and they were kind of hemming and hawing about the best move forward or whatever. So the general, the guy that was in charge of all the armies of Romulus, basically attempted a coup, and he was trying to take over another planet that would basically become New Romulus. And basically in this issue, he's foiled by his daughter Sela, who's also, he's a daughter of this Romulan general, as well as being the daughter of Tasha Yar from Next Generation. So it all comes to a head. Spock's there as well because they kidnapped Spock in order to get Worf and the rest of the crew of the Defiant to go to Antari, the planet that they wanted to take over, and make New Romulus, in order to get them to go to that planet and start laying the groundwork for them to come and take it over. They kidnapped Spock and held him hostage. So that's why Spock is there. So what I love, and that's kind of the details of the story, and you can see how it all plays out. And again, this Star Trek Defiant is going to eventually lead into lore war as well. So what I love about all the Star Trek books that are coming out right now, and specifically the main Star Trek book and the Star Trek Defiant book, which the main Star Trek book, written by Colin Kelly and Jackson Lansing, various artists have been on it. Defiant has been, from the start, written by Christopher Cantwell, who's a huge Star Trek fan. Art on almost every issue by Angel Unzieta, Marisa Louise on colors, and Clayton Cowell on letters. But what's great about these books is not only do you see characters you're familiar with, so there's been some time travel, so you see some people like Spock and Captain Kirk and that sort of stuff. But mostly, I mean, this is set after Deep Space Nine, which, that was I think it was the last time before the recent series that all started up that you had two Star Trek shows coming on simultaneously. The last couple of seasons of Star Trek Next Generation overlapped with Star Trek Deep Space Nine. So after Deep Space Nine ends, that's when you have these books set. So you're seeing characters you're familiar with, like Worf and Benjamin Sisko and Data, and Spock, and B'Elanna Torres from Voyager, and Tom Paris from Voyager, and that sort of thing. So you're seeing characters that you're familiar with. But these aren't just one-and-done type stories, which a lot of the other like the DC, the first Star Trek comics I ever read was like the DC stuff in the 80s, and those were definitely like one and done. It didn't really feel like anything more than just a pale comparison to the TV show. Now, some of the later stuff from IDW and Dark Horse, whatever, felt a little bit more like the Star Trek we kind of knew if you grew up during that generation watching Deep Space Nine and Star Trek Next Generation and Voyager. But these books go beyond that because they're taking those characters that we know and love, Picard and all those guys, and they're writing stories with those characters that feel like natural extensions of what the characters that we loved in the TV show would actually be doing. Right? So it's not just that they're cool Star Trek stories. They're just great stories. They're fun, they're exciting. You get callbacks to things that you've seen in past Star Trek episodes that's fun to see. And if you're a Trekkie, you're going to love it. But if you're just a fan of good stories and good sci-fi, you're going to love it as well. And the art is fantastic, and it feels like, okay, man, I would love. My favorite Star Trek show ever is Next Generation, and I would love to have more seasons of Star Trek: The Next Generation with Geordi and Guinan and Chief O'Brien and all those people. The problem is you can't go home again, right? Like that was 20 years ago, 30 years ago. Those people have aged up, right? I mean, it's part of the reason that the Picard show did so well, even though the story I haven't seen it, but I'm told the story doesn't really hold up that well. But nostalgia is like a powerful thing, right? But you can't go back, and you can even just say this for the original series, right? You can't go back and have the original series again with those same actors because a lot of them aren't even alive anymore. But this is a way to get the same type of stories that have the same sensibility. That it's not a retelling of stories that we've had before with Next Generation. Like I can go watch Next Generation, my favorite episodes that I've seen 100 times and probably know them by heart, and it's fun and it's entertaining. But now I'm getting that same tone and those same characters, but I'm able to get new stories of that. So that's for me what I enjoy about it. But also, like I said, they're just good Star Trek stories. They're just good science fiction stories that make sense and are compelling and have great art. Like I couldn't stand the episodes with Sela. Like I just didn't care for her as a character. Like she was so like annoying and unlikable. And she still has some of that here, but like she has been expanded on as a character so much more. Like you understand her motivations, and now she's one of those characters that I love to hate. You know what I mean? Not to the extent that I dislike her like Amanda Waller, where it's like I just too much, right? But yeah, she's despicable. Don't ever trust her. She's awful. I wouldn't go so far as to say evil, but she's just totally out for herself. But you completely understand why she's like that. You understand her motivations, and huge. Like Spock might be my favorite Star Trek character ever between him and Data. But yeah, these are just fantastic stories. I can't wait to see what happens with Lore War. And so if you haven't been reading any of the IDW Star Wars stuff, I do recommend picking it up. You can go pick up the trades, pick up Star Trek, pick up Defiant, Star Trek Defiant. Those are the two kind of main books. And they cross over a little bit here and there, but if you like one more than the other, you probably can just focus on one. But I do recommend picking them up. They're a lot of fun. And if you're a Star Trek fan, in my mind, they're must-reads. But if you're just a fan of science fiction and good stories, then yeah, I would say dip in and take a chance. But if you're a Star Wars fan, you got to be, or Star Trek fan rather, you got to be reading this. They're so fantastic.
I get the sense with IDW Star Trek. I feel like I remember when Dark Horse was doing Star Wars back in the day when no one was collecting. They had low sales. Dark Horse Star Wars comics were always lower to moderate sales, and then of course they just exploded in popularity. Star Wars goes most to Marvel, and then everybody's scrambling to pick up the back issues of the Dark Horse Star Wars, and now all the key issues of Star Wars. If you want to buy classic Star Wars comics other than the original Marvel series, everyone is looking for those key issues from Dark Horse, and I feel like Star Trek is likely going to be with IDW because they got lower print runs, and it deserves more attention. But like everything, more. It deserves more readership. I think it's going to be one of those things. I think Star Trek is at some point Star Trek's going to become more popular. I know it has, it's on TV, it's on CBS streaming or Paramount, whatever, but it's still, I think, movie wise, it's still waiting to really explode again. And when it does, I'm just waiting for those IDW Star Trek back issues to really take off. And I'm going to be kicking myself because I haven't been picking them up.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Star Trek's never had that following the way Star Trek did. But to your point, I mean, how often, like Star Trek 42, right? The first appearance of Boba Fett in a Star Wars comic. That book was in not even dollar, in 25-cent bins for decades.
Yes, it was.
So who knows what the future of Star Trek might hold. So anyway, that does it for the books that we're going to talk about in detail. I did mention I'll talk about a couple of other titles you might want to be on the lookout for. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is up to issue number 4, also from IDW. I've never been a Turtles reader. I was told that you could pick up this new Turtles number 1 from Jace and Aaron, which is one of the highest selling comics of the year, and not having read Turtles before, but I haven't done it yet, so maybe I'll do that at some point. Also, Spawn up to number 359. We just had Todd McFarlane on the show earlier this week. He's returning to the writing duties as the regular writer of the main series of Spawn with the next issue 360. And he had some fantastic things to say, so go check out that interview if you're so inclined, and pick up Spawn 359 if you'd like. Also, Feral from Image Comics, which is by Tony Fleeks with art by Trish Forstner, is out this week. Very popular series. Rogue Sun from a friend of the show, Ryan Parrott, up to issue number 23. I wanted to talk about that, but I'm a couple issues behind. I need to read 21 and 22 and then 23. So that's out this week. Also, Falling in Love on the Path to Hell, number 6, which is a series Rocky really enjoys, from Jerry Dugan, has its 6th issue out this week. And there was one other book I wanted to... Oh, Gotcha Man, issue number 5 from Mad Cave, which some people know as Battle of the Planet, some people know as G-Force. It is up to issue number 25, and then Galactor, which is the main villain of Gotcha Man, the Gotcha Man Galactor miniseries, has its final issue with issue number 4 out this week as well. So those are some other books you might want to be on the lookout for at your local comic shop this week. Book of the week, Rocky. I think I know what you're gonna pick, but
I would. It's Red Before Black. Yeah, at number 3. That was, and the thing is, what a compliment. Like I said, I clearly wasn't aware of some plot aspects of issues 1 and even and I forgot some of 2, and you filled me in. But I'm absolutely I'll be finishing this series for sure. I love Red Before Black. Absolutely love it. And I loved Tin Can Society. It was very good as well. But Stephanie Phillips, honestly, she's sort of pulling me back. I've been reading Grimm, Stephanie Phillips Grimm. I've been enjoying that. Yeah. But honestly, it's sort of, I don't know, it's starting to drag a little bit lately. But I'm still enjoying it. I got every issue. So I'm still enjoying it. But this Red Before Black, maybe it's just, sometimes a comic book just feels fresh, and there's something about Red Before Black. It just feels like a Tarantino movie to me on steroids. And I'm thoroughly enjoying it.
Yeah, the thing that maybe I like the most about Red Before Black, I mean, because I'm a huge fan of Stephanie as well. I think she's just a super talented writer, and she's an awesome person as well. I always love seeing her and talking to her. And what's funny is I think she'd been on the show like 3 times, and we'd corresponded a bunch online, and I never met her before this year, and I got a chance to meet her like earlier this year, I think in March, when she happened to pass through Phoenix. And then I also saw her at New York Comic Con this year. It was great, and maybe I saw her one other time this year as well, which is weird. Like I'd never seen her before, and then I got to see her 3 times in 1 year. So, but anyway, the thing that I love most about Red Before Black is I don't have any damn idea where that story's going to go. Like,
yeah, that's exactly right.
We're talking about it, and we're saying, yeah, it's got some, ideas we've seen before with the whole like Odd Couple. With Leo and Val, and they seem like a weird pairing, and the frenemies, whatever. We've seen weird pairings in stories before. We've seen frenemies before. I mentioned Thelma and Louise. We've seen that before. The whole idea of recruiting a prisoner and giving them an early release to go and infiltrate a mob. We've seen all that stuff before. All that being said, with all these ideas of things we've seen before, Stephanie's mixed them up. And like you said, Rocky made it fresh, and we don't have any idea where it's going. No, I have no clue.
Yeah.
I have no clue what's going to happen next. Absolutely none. So, well, my book of the week is Cal, 1964, for all the reasons I said when I was talking about it. It's brilliantly done. I think Kyle Higgins is just such a fantastic writer. I don't think he gets enough credit for the things that he does. I mean, No One is probably my favorite comic of the year, maybe my favorite comic of the last 2 years. I can't wait for the feature film to come out. He's just brilliantly talented, super nice guy. And you know, when he crafts stories like this that are so nuanced and layered, and like just takes the care to do it well, like everything from when this is set, like the time period it's set, the city that it's set in, the art from Rod Reese, which captures that time period perfectly. I mean, it's an amazing story, which is, like I said, you probably could tell when I was talking about it before. It just annoyed me so often when I'd see people go, "Oh yeah, Cal, it just dragged. It was too slow." I'm like, man, you're not understanding what this book is. So, anyway, that's my book of the week. Thanks everybody for joining us. As always, we really appreciate it. Don't forget to head over to Rocky's channel, Comic Space Boom ! On YouTube. That's where you can catch our DC Spotlight for the week, find out what our books of the week are. Also, don't forget about the giveaway for 30 days, a whole month of, oh my god, why am I drawing it? Global Comics. I couldn't remember what it was called for a second there. For Global Comics, if you want a code for a free month of Global Comics, be sure you leave some comments below for this episode. And if you like listening to our content audio only when you're driving or exercising, whatever, just go to whatever podcast platform or app you prefer, do a search for the Comic Source and subscribe. And not only can you listen to all our content moving forward, but you have literally thousands of episodes to go back and listen to, of reviews and convention coverage and interviews and all that kind of stuff. And as long as you're with us here on the Comic Source YouTube channel, make sure you subscribe here as well. Ring the notification bell so you don't miss any new content. Like and subscribe. We really appreciate it. So that's going to do it for this episode, everybody. Happy Thanksgiving. Don't eat too much. And if you do, be sure you take a nice long nap. So anything to add, Rocky? Any last thoughts?
Just happy Thanksgiving to all my American friends and yourself. And yeah, and before you fall asleep, read a comic.
Oh, definitely. I'm definitely going to be reading some comics. Reading some comics this weekend for sure. So, all right. Well, that's going to do it, everybody. Thanks for joining us as always. We'll talk to you next time.
Catch you later.